Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on in to PWTorch Fireside Chat for Tuesday, December 20th, 2022. What's going on, everybody? I'm PWTorch Assistant Editor Zach Haydorn. Glad to be here. Glad you guys are all here with me. We got quite a bit to talk about today. It's been a busier than usual wrestling day. Coming out of a pretty, I don't know, what I thought was a pretty solid episode of Monday Night Raw last night, and a kind of a surprisingly good episode of Monday Night Raw last night due to just kind of the limited stuff that they announced for the show, the fact that it's the holidays, they're going into like holiday programming, so I just didn't have high expectations for that show, and it delivered, I thought, in a pretty meaningful way. So we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Monday Night Raw. And we're also going to preview tonight's episode of NXT, which is kind of a bit of a loaded episode of NXT, in my opinion. So, yeah, we'll spend time doing that as well. Lots to discuss. To everybody who's live right now, thanks for being here. Ed, appreciate you. Super intrigued to see how they address Mandy Rose tonight on NXT as well. Don't know. I don't know. My guess is that they just kind of take the approach where Roxanne Perez talks about Mandy Rose and puts her over, right? I think that that you don't want to just kind of disregard Mandy Rose outright because she's not with the company. Because, part of what made Roxanne Perez's victory last week impactful is that she dethroned Mandy Rose, someone who had held the title for over 400 days, right? Like that, they have to give some kind of credence to that because it's a feather in Roxanne's cap, that she was able to dethrone Mandy Rose. And so I don't know that you want to just totally bury Mandy Rose, and I'm not expecting WWE to do that tonight. I mean, we'll see. They've shown to be more petty than sometimes even I can believe. And so, I mean, I certainly wouldn't put it past them, but it just doesn't make business sense to do that at this point in time. Like, it makes sense to really lean into it and talk about the fact that Roxanne beat her, and beat her clean, 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. I think that's the key. That's the key thing that I think you're going to see tonight on NXT. So yeah, real quick, taking care of a little bit of business. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. We update this every single day, and we are live every single day talking wrestling with you. Had a really fun time this year building out this channel, and I hope that you guys all get a lot out of it and want to keep coming back. So hit subscribe. It helps us out a lot. And also get you in the know as to when new content drops, when we're live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, appreciate that. All right. Enough of the business. Let's talk more wrestling. All right. We'll start with Monday Night Raw, big picture, and then we'll go to NXT. We'll finish up with NXT in a little bit. So I thought last night was a pretty good episode of Raw, with a lot of high points, and a lot of interesting storyline development. Like, for example, the bloodline situation, right? It has to be challenging week in and week out on two shows to present the bloodline in an interesting way, right? I mean, like, at some point the ideas are just aren't there anymore, I would imagine. So I thought it was pretty darn intriguing to see how Paul Levesque went about presenting that team yesterday in that group, with like Roman Reigns starting off the show, kind of cutting a stone face, straight up heel promo into the camera with Paul Heyman. And then you have the Usos following up on what Roman said, and they're attacking people backstage, and you got them filming it, kind of in a raw way with a selfie camera. I thought that was a really interesting way to present the bloodline. You can't do that every single week, but I think it connected well with the story that is being told with the Bloodline and Kevin Owens. I think that it kind of helped freshen up the Bloodline a little bit, so it's not the same old, same old. And then you got a really good main event match out of it as well, with Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens against the Usos. That's a solid Raw main event. And so I thought that story had really good moments. The one moment that I kind of was questioning, and not that I didn't think it was good, but I just don't know that it's effective. And that is on what you're talking about here. Sami Zayn cutting kind of like a promo in the ring that had like big undertones of babyface to it. Like talking about how they're going to do whatever they want, whenever they want. No one can stop them. Chanting Sammy Uso. Like, he led a lot of that. Like, if you go back and you watch that promo that he did, like, he's kind of cueing the crowd there to do what he wants them to do. And it seemed like that was cheer. Like, there was not a big effort on Sami Zayn's part to get the audience to boo. And that I found really interesting. Again, not effective, because it's not consistent with what Roman said at the beginning, which was very much a straight up heel promo. And I know that Sammy is like the epitome of a tweener at this time, but the Bloodline is still a heel group. And so if you're going to have Sammy run around there with them, you don't want to dilute the heel nature of everything, because that'll be a hard hill for Kevin Owens to overcome if, there's no heel heat on the side of the Bloodline and it's all people just loving Sammy. So to me, Sammy has to be careful with what he says and how he says things out there, because you don't want to get this to a place where, Sami Zayn is making the entire Bloodline supremely likable. I think that there are points in time where Sammy can make himself likable, right? Because we're assuming here that down the road, Roman Reigns is going to turn on Sami Zayn. And so you want Sammy to be likable in that regard, so that he's a babyface, at some point, opposite Reigns. But again, you got to be careful with that. He has to be likable himself. He can't be a driving force in making the Bloodline likable away from Roman Reigns, or even with Roman Reigns. And so that, I think, is going to be a really interesting element to watch going forward with this storyline, is just what do we start to see the Bloodline do with Zayn, knowing that Zayn is just kind of almost incapable of getting heel heat at this point, unless he's opposite like Kevin Owens, which we saw to end the show last night. So really kind of a nuanced approach. Let's answer your question here. Do we get a three-way with Owens, Rollins, and Roman Reigns? We could. There's a couple pay-per-views before WrestleMania here. We've got the Royal Rumble, we've got Elimination Chamber, and then a whole mess of TV, right? A whole mess of TV. And so, I wouldn't say no, because you just don't know. You don't know what Paul Levesque is going to need to do to pull a lever on, on a TV main event to like drive a number. You just don't know. So I wouldn't put it past him. At the same time, we have to remember Roman Reigns is a part-time guy, and so, you got to assume that you're going to save his appearances in 2023 for big time moments, singles matches, I would imagine, mostly anyway. Obviously, stuff like War Games, obviously stuff where John Cena is going to be coming back. Obviously that plays, but, you want Roman to be around, and you want to use him when it's most necessary. And so does that mean a three-way with Owens and Rollins? It could, but I feel like that's lower down the list. I think singles matches with Owens and Rollins would be a higher priority at this point in time than a triple threat match would. So then on Raw this week, we also had lots of good movement in the women's division. I felt like it's strange to say, but it's great to see that they have, a program and a story and a feud going on outside of the Raw Women's Championship. Right now, you've got two key women's division stories on Raw, and then a third kind of talent in the women's division in Rhea Ripley, off doing her thing. And, she doesn't really have like a quote unquote feud at the moment with someone else in the women's division, but she's positioned in a really good place on the card. So that's three, key roles that a handful of different women in the women's division have in Monday Night Raw on a week-to-week basis. And first you have the Raw Women's title picture with Bianca Belair as champion. She's defending against Alexa Bliss in 2 weeks' time. Last week, we saw kind of the development of Alexa Bliss just kind of losing herself and almost connecting with Sister Abigail on Bianca Belair in the ring. And this week, I thought there was some really good follow-up on that. Like, the fact that they did follow up on it points, right? Points, thumbs up. And the fact that they followed up on it the way that they did, I thought was believable and logical. You had Alexa Bliss out there talking openly about kind of how she was just taken over by the Fiend and Bray Wyatt, and she's still recovering from that, and she's still trying to figure herself out and find herself with that situation and coming out of that situation. And I thought that was a really kind of sympathetic response where you can look at it and go, okay, yeah, I totally get that. I saw it all play out. I get that. And the great thing about that is that's exactly how Bianca Belair reacted. Like, she reacted like a normal person would by giving Bliss some sympathy, giving her some like, hey, I understand. I understand where you're coming from, but you can't be doing that to me, So I thought that was a really logical way for her to respond to Bliss. And so you had good follow-up. You have a logical story playing out now. And now you have the question mark of what was going on with Alexa Bliss when she bashed Bianca Belair over the head with the glass vase, I think it was, or glass cup, or just a glass. You have that added story now too. And so there's going to be some intrigue there. What happens next week? Is this a heel turn for Alexa Bliss? Is it just Alexa Bliss trying to remind Bianca Belair that she's a former champion too, and she's been at the top of the women's division also, like she said in that promo? So it connected with me. I thought it worked well. I think that I judge these things by, was it entertaining to watch? Yes. Are the characters in a good position coming out of it? Yes. Is the match in a good position coming out of it? Yes. Thumbs up. That's a good angle. And then you also have the story going on right now between Becky Lynch and Bayley. And that to me is like an interesting thing to kind of break down, because it's almost like Becky Lynch. I just feel watching it that Becky Lynch is in the place of like, hey, we need somebody to fix Bayley. Right? Someone has to come out here and fix Bayley, for goodness sakes. Like, we need her back. And here, Becky Lynch, go find it in her. That's what it seemed like to me yesterday. And I thought Becky Lynch versus Bayley was a good match. I was surprised by the finish just because, WWE has a lot in Becky Lynch, and she's the second biggest star that they have, arguably behind Roman Reigns. She's presumably headed towards a big match for WrestleMania, but here she is, doing a job to Bayley on TV. I don't think this feud is over. I think they're gonna this builds to another match, or it's like a underlying story in the Royal Rumble match. And that WWE likes to have that. They like to have the overarching story arc of that match being, hey, you win, you go to WrestleMania and fight for the title. But also they like to feature rivalries in there too. And so this very much could be, building towards that. I'm sure that it is. Regardless, though, Bayley gets a big win. And then she didn't even get a TV entrance today, folks. Yesterday. Like, Bayley. Since when does that happen to Bayley? Like, that seems like a pretty big fall from grace for her, even though they're trying to get her repaired. And so I thought it was really telling to kind of see how that played out. I think they're going to have another match. My guess is, yes, feud at the Royal Rumble too. And then we go from there. But The bottom line is they've got, two solid programs in the women's division on Monday Night Raw. That's a thumbs up. I mean, I think a lot of people have been clamoring for that for a long time, and now we finally have a situation where that's where we're at. Add in Rhea Ripley, who got a win over Akira Tozawa, her first intergender match on Raw. It was not a good match, not by a long shot. It was like such a sloppy match, and there were botches and just sloppiness abound. And it just was not a good match, period. But it was still notable that Rhea got the win over Tozawa. You had the commentary team play it up in a big way, in a way that kind of told everybody that this is a big deal. Even though that, Rhea Ripley is such a bigger act and a bigger star than Tozawa that it's almost like not a big deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Rhea Ripley like body slammed Luke Gallows through a table like the other week, right? That to me is way more notable than, way more impressive than beating Akira Tozawa, unfortunately. So it was what it was, but it was an attempt, and you have a hot act, or a boiling act in Rhea Ripley too. So thumbs up to what's been going on with the women's division on Raw. Again, like I said, it capped off a really nice show, top to bottom. Drop your questions in the chat on Monday Night Raw if you've got any, and I'll make sure to get to them. Tonight we have WWE NXT, and it's a pretty good card, I think, for like a late December episode of the WWE third brand in NXT. First and foremost, we have Kaden Carter and Katana Chance will defend their tag team titles in a triple threat tag team match. This should be interesting. It's Katana Chance and Kaden Carter against Toxic Attraction, against Ivy Nile? Yes. Ivy Nile and Tatum Paxley. So it's a triple threat. I can't wait to see how they book this match without Mandy Rose as part of the Toxic Attraction act. You just don't know what what the positioning is going to be for Toxic Attraction. Like, are they going to get a new kind of singles lead at the front, or are they just going to be a tag team? I don't think we really know that yet, but tonight will be a big indication as to where they go. Niall and Paxley, I think they're a budding team, and both acts are kind of like budding acts. So I think this is a good spot for them from an experience perspective. But I don't think you can really put the belts on them at this time. You want them to have more momentum than what they have now, which is nothing. And then you have the champions, and I think this is a situation where you keep the titles on the champs, because, man, without those titles, I don't know what Carter and Chance have or do. The titles are kind of borderline making them at the moment, and I don't know you want to derail that. They've become a better team and a more reliable act for NXT with the belts on their shoulders. I think Toxic Attraction could use the titles too, but they may be main roster bound. Like, they've kind of done everything there is to do in NXT. So when you talk about it with that reality in mind, this tells me, you're going with the champs here, and Kaden Carter and Katana Chance to retain. All right. In addition to that, we've got a blood feud of blood feuds. Zoe Stark versus Nikita Lyons, one-on-one, former tag team partners, and now they're colliding after Zoe Stark turned on Lyons a handful of weeks ago. This, I hope, is a good match. I really do. I want to see Nikita Lyons go to that next level. She seems to have a personality. She seems to have some charisma, but she hasn't been able to harness that charisma and personality in a way that's noticeable in the ring at all. And because of that, it's just like, she has this act, she kind of has some momentum, but nowhere for it to go because she just doesn't have the skills at this point in time. But this is a point in time for her where she can hopefully step up, and hopefully she's been, obviously working on the match, and Zoe Stark is a good opponent. Like, Stark had a heck of a match, in a heck of a role, I guess, in the Survivor Challenge, the Iron Survivor Challenge at NXT Deadline. She had a heck of a showing. I think she's real. Like, she has been perfect on the microphone, but she's been like really serviceable in the ring, and she's found like a connection between this heel personality and the way she wants to wrestle matches. And that's important for any like up and coming stars to find that balance. And I think she has. And so right now the ceiling is way, way higher for Zoe Stark. I mean, significantly higher. And so for that reason, I put Zoe Stark over. Now, as you're pointing out in the chat here, if Zoe Stark's main roster bound, then yeah, you're probably going to give the nod to Nikita Lyons here. That only makes sense. I don't know that there's room for Zoe Stark yet on the main roster. Like, I think that she's somebody that maybe you could look at after WrestleMania, or she gets an appearance in the Women's Royal Rumble, right? And then kind of makes her main roster debut after WrestleMania, because there's just not a place for her on that card or in the division right now, going into WrestleMania, where there's going to be some big time matches. And so I hold off on that, which means giving her the win tonight. Also, we got a tag team title defense. The New Day defending against Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen. Babyface versus babyface here, guys. So this one's a little strange. This one's a little odd. But New Day's wrestling on NXT, and I wonder. I'm really curious to see what kind of business that does in terms of ratings. In terms of like who tunes in just to see New Day, if anybody. I don't know. But this very much seems like that. And yes, we'll get a storyline progression about the bar situation, and Kiana James. I'm sure we'll see more interactions between Jensen and her. So kind of like a foundation for a lot of other things that are going to happen on the show tonight. Obviously, New Day retains here. I mean, no question. I mean, if you really have to feel like you need to protect Briggs and Jensen for some reason, like, you can have Pretty Deadly get involved, and kind of screw up the whole match. There's some heat in that, I suppose. And then you keep the feud between Pretty Deadly and New Day alive and strong. But there's no way the New Day loses their titles here. Absolutely not. And then last but not least, and what I think is going to be a really like great match, especially NXT style, is Axiom versus Carmelo Hayes in singles action. Both these guys can work. Both these guys can have great matches, and they've had great matches. And you got a little taste of what they're bringing to the table, or what they can bring to the table in the Iron Survivor Challenge at Deadline. And now you're going to get a heavy dose of it in singles competition. So this is like your can't miss match of the night. And it adds to, some pretty good matches as well. Carmelo Hayes is winning here, folks. I mean, I think the Axiom act has gotten stronger and has gotten better as it's been on television. But I mean, Carmelo Hayes is clearly like the focus, and top star here in this match, and arguably on the whole show. He's not losing this match, so he's gonna win. But it should be a really good match, and I hope you guys all get a chance to watch it. That's the show. We'll call it a day right there. Azan and who else joined us today? Ed and Hassan and everybody else who's tuned in. Thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoy NXT tonight. We'll be back tomorrow for an AEW Dynamite preview and probably a look back on NXT as well. So join us then, same time, same place. Subscribe if you haven't. Click the little notification button if you haven't once you're subscribed, so you know when we go live every single day. And appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much. I'm PWTorch Assistant Editor Zach Haydorn, and we'll catch you guys next time. See ya.